So I have one client where Bing now makes up 25% of our combined search spend, and 75% of the Bing spend in that scenario is on Performance Max.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Paid Search NYC podcast. Today, very excited to be chatting to Jon Kagan, who, according to his LinkedIn tagline, is a search marketing person. And I think he's done everything and more to deserve that. He has spoken at SMX, a big industry event. He's a regular contributing writer for Search Engine Journal. Last year, he made the top 100 PPC or most influential PPC experts. And that's all outside of his day job, where currently he is a director of search at Emissive, having previously been at Digitas, Mediacom, holding various senior search positions. So very excited to have him on the podcast. Jon, thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Hopefully that intro did you justice. I didn't miss anything out.
You got the key part of it.
I got the key parts. I was checking back actually through some content, and when I saw your post about the top 100, it sounded like that wasn't the first time you made that list.
I want to say it was maybe the fifth time. Although my colleague pointed out that every time I made the list, I keep dropping lower and lower in the number.
Maybe that's a reflection of the industry just getting better and better and better, and more people saying people is going in. Yeah, that's very good. The topic we have for today was Performance Max, specifically Performance Max on Bing, and I want to get to that. But before we do, we normally like to start off with a little bit around your career journey. So I mentioned very briefly some of the positions you've held in your current role, but take us through in a bit more detail, maybe where your career started, how it progressed, the sort of role changes you went through, and then bring us up to what you do today.
Yeah. Honestly, I slipped and fell into this industry. Senior year of college, I had switched majors from forensic pathology to marketing, which was just a natural segue. I was on my way to go take the FDNY exam, but I figured I should probably try and get a college internship that paid just so I could say I'd at least tried. And there was an agency out on Long Island that I literally found a job posting in the old newspaper, the print edition, and I applied for an internship. It's an agency that's still around, did it, or did.com. And they brought me in for an interview, and they said, hey, we'll give you minimum wage if you'll do your internship. I did it for 3 days a week for a year. And then they took me on full time. I said, I don't really know what it is I'm doing here, but I understand it. I understand how Google works, so let me keep this job. And that was a little over 20 years ago now, and I've just kind of been continuously doing it. I expanded, obviously, from just Google search to Bing, Yahoo. I mean, when I got into space, Yahoo was still the big engine. Paid social, programmatic display, what have you. And I also just cannot get out of the agency world. For one reason or another, I'm just kind of addicted to it. So I've done my time with some of the small agencies. I've been with AMSA for a little over 2 years now, and I kind of love it.
The other thing you mentioned there is, being in the industry for 20 years. I'm really interested in hearing your perspective with someone who's been in it that long. How does the 20 years of search feel? Does it feel like there's been like a continuation of a theme throughout search, and like it, looking back, like it's obvious, or do you feel like there have been moments where search has just really pivoted and changed? Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there has been on the consumer side, it's been continuous. It's always been, I have a question, I need information, I'm going to go over to XYZ search browser or search engine and put in my question. And that side's been continuous. On the advertiser side, it's been pivot after pivot after pivot. I mean, when I think back when I started, I was still advertising directly on Ask Jeeves when it was still Ask Jeeves, AOL, Yahoo. Match types were limited. We could actually see what our competitors were bidding on or whatnot with your, but what their actual bids were, so that we could actually drive up their costs without harming ourselves. We had higher levels of transparency, and the concept of AI and even bid strategies back then was nothing. And I look at it now, and it's an entirely different world. But to the consumer, they would never know the difference.
I have another question, and I didn't prep you for any of these, so I apologize. There's some curveballs here. 20 years ago, the things you had to be good at, is there anything you still need to be good at today that you were 20 years ago? And I ask that because that feels like something that could stand the test of time, continue to stand the test of time. Is there anything that you were doing that 20 years ago that you still need to be good at today?
There are two, and I require this for anyone that ever wants to intern or work for me. You have to know two things very well. Excel, an Excel spreadsheet. If you can't do a pivot table or concatenation, you will not thrive or survive in this industry. As simplistic as it is, and it's becoming more and more of a common thing as taught in college, thank God for that. But if you can't do basic Excel formulas, you won't survive, and that has been a staple for as long as I can be, or been in the space. And easy math off the top of your head. I'm not saying go divide 258,900 by pi or something. I'm saying if someone has given me 50 clicks off 500 impressions, you need to be able to rattle off a very close to CTR number off the top of your head. And that's more important for anyone with being client facing or brand facing than anything else. And then the last thing is honestly how you present yourself. It's always, when individuals come to us, they come to us for the answers. And the worst thing I've ever seen is people that are brilliant in the space that give correct answers, but they don't command or they don't provide any level of confidence that the brain will turn around and say they question data or they question answers. So the other, I take back, there's the three things. And the third thing is just being confident.
And I guess that confidence probably comes from the first two. And I guess to summarize those two, it's like data proficiency, being able to know how to manipulate data in Excel, handle data, and then, that sort of top level, good with numbers, maths. I think it's interesting, as you were sort of talking through that example, I was thinking through all the times that I have been the person who's had to QA data, and, you see, in that example you gave, 100 impressions, 50 clicks, and then it says the CTR is 2%. And you're like, that doesn't feel right. And you do it, and you're like, oh, okay, that's because it's hard coded and someone changed the number, and it's like, and that's where that comes in, and it's super useful because that saves you, looking a bit daft in front of a client. Yep, awesome. Okay, thank you for entertaining me on that little sidebar. Let's talk about PMAX. So we had as our topic PMAX, but in particular Bing PMAX. I guess where I'd like to start is, what has been your experience with PMAX for Bing and Google separately?
Ironically, I'm working on an article and case study right now on it for Search Engine Journal. When Google first announced PMAX, I was one of the biggest critics of it. I was vehemently anti-Performance Max when Google announced it. They had so many flaws and just lack of information about it that it just wasn't right. But what we also discovered is we were more or less being forced into it. Like we were running the local search ads. If I wanted to still be on maps, I had to do local search ads. The shopping fees were now starting to grow alongside it. And honestly, over time, I started to warm up to it. And more so, I warmed up to it because the results were just, I don't want to say I was compromising my values in the space, but I had to make a concession of, I had to become, I had to be happy with the results. I was happy with the results, but it would mean I was going to be uncomfortable with the methodology for it. And it's something I honestly had to do. And I went from being one of the most anti-Performance Max people for Google, probably within the industry. Regrettably find a lot of my tweets related to that. And now it is literally a staple for nearly every single one of my brands. Then I actually have to make a case for when I can't use it. And honestly, that full acceptance transition is probably only a couple of years old at this point now. Granted, it's really, I got to be in early access in 2020. We ended up abandoning it. We went back in 2021, abandoned it again. 2022, we kind of started going in hard. And my biggest fear, it was going to be monkey see, monkey do with Google and Bing, that Bing would adopt Performance Max. And I was already getting good results from Bing, like, please don't go down this road. please don't go down this road. They went down that road. And I was incredibly hesitant to it. And the only reason I actually ended up accepting and trying Bing Performance Max is, you may remember, Bing's MSAN or Microsoft Search Audience Network became mandatory for search 2023. As in, you couldn't opt out of it unless you did a lot of paperwork. And I had back channeled with a contact of mine at Bing, trying to figure out how to best way to deal with the Microsoft Audience Network. And they said, you have two ways of doing it. You either launch audience ads and treat it like you would treat a GDN, and that'll help control it, or you go the route of Performance Max, and that'll take some of the heavy lifting of the audience network off of search. Turned out that wasn't true, but it did cause me to test out Bing Performance Max, and I went in with very low expectations, and they well superseded those. We've been running it for health insurance brands. We've rolled it out for e-commerce brands, and to a point where it's now rivaling the performance of Google Performance Max. And the thing I like most about the Bing side of it is, I know I'm not going to lose impressions to YouTube. I'm not required to have a YouTube video or a video in there, which is always one of our biggest problems, because I've had brands that didn't have video assets. Google would go and create the YouTube video, and they'd be horrendous. So I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about wasting impressions on maps and a variety of other placements. So I knew it was much more concentrated for me. And the data quickly spoke for itself. I'm like, all right, I grossly underestimated Performance Max. Yeah, there's some little things that it could work on, but it's the same thing as Google. But it's now becoming a staple for it. It's better than I could have ever anticipated for e-commerce, and for lead gen on our insurance brand is just doing phenomenally.
Before I get to my first question, one line you said there, which I think summarizes how a lot of people feel in this industry a lot of the time, was happy with the results, not happy with the methods.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's very funny. So super interesting to hear how that performance turned out. I guess my first question is, if you can share, we normally see Bing within the US of being 5-10% when it comes to search as like a baseline of total search market. Do you see that? Is that the same for Performance Max, or is it slightly higher or lower?
It's slightly higher. Now, the Performance Max is so Bing as a whole had traditionally been about 5 or 10% of my search spend when I compare versus out of Google. We did actual incrementality for Performance Max. So in some instances, it's high as 20% now for us. But Bing is very niche on certain verticals. It does very well in financial services, does very well in healthcare, and after that, it's kind of a mixed bag. Those happen to be two verticals that I do most of my work in. So I have one client where Bing now makes up 25% of our combined search spend, and 75% of the Bing spend in that scenario is on Performance Max.
I remember seeing numbers banded around relating to Bing demographics, so it being skewed slightly older, has higher household income.
Yep.
Do you think they're the main factors for why those two sectors, financial and healthcare, did well, or is it something else?
I honestly do believe that is one of the main factors. It's when it's used by your target audience more than anyone else, it's going to help skew it. And it is when I look at other verticals that I work in, we can't scale up Bing volume or efficiency as high as compared to my healthcare or financial services scenarios.
Yeah. That's interesting. The other question I had there is, when it comes to inventory, how much of a breakdown do you get there? Because obviously Microsoft does have access to some inventory that Google doesn't. I'm thinking, there is LinkedIn inventory, I guess, but I'm not sure how much it accesses that. There's Xbox, there's Copilot. Do they disclose how much of that inventory is in there, if any? And do you get any reporting in the UI?
There are reports. I do get some placement reports. I believe, and I could be very wrong, so if anyone from Microsoft is listening, apologies. I don't believe there's any Xbox inventory at all. That's kind of reserved. You're going to pay a premium for that one. The Copilot is on the newer side, so I don't have that type of insight yet. I get a lot of reports on, like, you've shown on MSN or you've shown on the Bing search page, Outlook, what have you, to that degree. There's a lot of this black box that goes in under Audience Network where if I dug deeper, I could probably find that information, but I already know the domains it's going to be showing in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I saw a slide not too long ago that broke down the inventory available across Microsoft. And like you said, a lot of that stuff is reserved. It's a different, buying process. So it feels like when you're talking about the difference in share versus traditional shirts being like 15, 20%, my gut is telling me it's kind of what we talked about first. It's more of a demographic thing, which is, I think that's just, it's a great tip. Like if you're trying to weigh up the importance of Bing within your media mix, demographic still plays a part, even though these platforms are huge. There is still a bit of a skew there. So that's pretty interesting. I guess on the Microsoft inventory, we can ask Nava Hopkins, shout out to Nava, who's now ad liaison there. So we'll ask her that question. What are the other, if any, tactical or setting-based approaches within PMAX Bing that are unique to Bing that you need to be mindful of?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, I don't know if I would call it necessarily I guess it's a setting. And when this came to light with our performance reports, Google has been pushing us to drop shopping outright and just let Performance Max take over. And we do see a good bit of distribution for shopping. So it kind of makes sense in Google. However, when I've run the reports for the shopping feed for sales, impressions, clicks, we're getting negligible anything coming out of the shopping feed for Bing Performance Max, which is therefore making us turn around and say, we can't give up the shopping feed or we can't give up the shopping ads. And that's been one of the biggest differentiators for us.
So just so I understand that, you're saying that when you turn off shopping and just run it in PMAX in Bing, you lose out on the shopping inventory. It doesn't pick it up as much in that form.
That's what appears. Yeah, we weren't running shopping for a while, and we picked up Bing Performance Max expecting the shopping to really start to pick up on it. But when we started reviewing our product traffic in the product feed itself, we realized we were getting almost nothing coming from it. As far as we could tell, it's predominantly on the search side.
Trying to break that down as to why that might be.
Your guess honestly is as good as mine when it comes to that one. Where when I look at Google for my e-com brands, when we look at the product feed breakout, it's a largely shopping and followed by search. But on PMAX, it seems, as far as we could tell, they don't have quite the same reporting. It's more largely on the search side and almost nothing from the shopping side.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a really great call out for people who are looking to test. So that's super useful. Is there anything else you'd bring up that's different?
And this really comes down to your vertical. We are very stringent on our demographic targeting. Google, they added it at the PMAX campaign level. We had already been doing it in our audience signals where we do certain ages, certain incomes. In Bing, it realistically stops at the 10-year age block. There's not a whole lot more to it. But there's nothing new. That being said, I understand we can do the integration in with LinkedIn. I'm just starting to play with that for PMAX itself. But that's really realistically it. There are not as many placements ultimately when it comes to Bing Performance Max, but at the same point, that's not a bad thing. It allows us to have the budget more honed and focused rather than spending off on God knows what website.
My mind was going to a question actually on AI Max, and if you've heard anything around Bing developing that as a product.
I have not. I mean, once again, it's monkey see, monkey do. The second Google started rolling it out, I guarantee Bing started mulling it over, or because they changed the name already once. It was Search Max, and they changed it to AI Max. I can only assume that Bing will do it. That being said, Bing's broad match is a little bit more on the erratic side, I've discovered over the years. So theoretically, it may already be that, and they were just ahead of the game. Inadvertently.
Yeah. I think the reason my mind went there is because PMAX does better than you expect it would for Bing, but it's not that shopping is a big part of that. And there's no video. So it's search and display plus some other stuff. So it's like PMAX is maybe good at unlocking more of the search part than PMAX in Google is, because PMAX in Google is already probably having to combat with broad. I guess it's like, if you're running exact and broad on Google, jumping into PMAX is that the search element of that benefit is going to be smaller than Bing, where you've gone from exact straight to PMAX, and that's where you're getting that bigger benefit in search. So it's a better product for accessing search inventory in Bing, maybe than broad is.
I mean, honestly, I haven't thought of it that way, but I think you might be hitting a nail on the head right there.
Interesting. Okay. Well, you helped me get there, so thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is pretty interesting to think about how the inventory types are different, and I think that's probably how from what you've said and the things I've heard, that kind of explains the performance. Because otherwise, you have to believe that like the rest of that inventory, which is largely display or maybe some other stuff, is like just performs really well, which feels less likely. But
I mean, the big thing I look at with PMAX is if you go to the Bing homepage, which used to be the MSN homepage, and they just come out with that whole newsfeed concept scenario, and you sit there and actually look at the content, that's where we see a lot of our Performance Max placements show in the MSAN network, and it's working a little bit more fine-tuned theoretically off a retargeting behavior scenario based off the audiences that we've uploaded into it. And that is oddly still a big consumer source, especially on the older skewing age group, which allows us to thrive. The other thing, and this is where Bing is somewhat of an equivalency to that of Google, is Google can tap, and actually has been one of my biggest complaints. One of the placements you can get with Performance Max in Google is in Gmail. I actually was doing this analysis last night. Out of 20 clients that we have in Performance Max, only one of them actually had shown placement in Gmail in the past 2 or 3 weeks, where we know that we've seen for our own ads show up in Outlook, email or online Outlook for MSAN. So we're under the assumption that's probably skewing a bit higher, and email is a good place to sneak in. We've discovered over the years. We've seen that with Google's demand gen, the old Google Discover ad unit as well. So we know that the Gmail is a good placement, and granted, I can't do the deepest analysis possible on Bing Performance Max, but we do suspect we're probably getting a lot of benefit out of the Outlook email.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if there's like some supply-demand dynamics going on there where there's just more advertisers adopting PMAX or going after those sort of placements, whereas in Bing, there's that supply-demand balance is a little bit less or more favorable in terms of the supply, and that's why you're getting you're getting into those placements, and B, there might be like a media cost benefit as well. I guess it all just points to like testing this stuff out and not kind of writing it off because it didn't work, when it first came out or whatever. I guess actually to go back when it first came out, I know some of the testing that I saw showed that it would extinguish budget very quickly, or there was some issues there. Have you ever had any issues with that, or is that all largely unresolved?
This has been a on and off concern, and depends honestly on the day of the week. We've seen it go through the lower budget go quickly, and I can only assume there's some degree of spend thresholding. If I put in for $25 a day, I will either see it not spend at all, or it'll deplete the budget within 2 hours. If I put the budget in at $100 a day, I see it more spread out throughout the day. The big thing I don't see with Bing Performance Max, I do see with Google, is Bing doesn't overspend its budget cap. So Google has the ability to go over up to 200% over. I've actually never run into that with Bing. The other weird oddity, and every rep that I've talked to at Bing has told me, you need to give Bing 6 weeks on Performance Max to ramp up. Just don't touch it for 6 weeks, which there's honestly no way in hell I can let that happen. I have to touch it to some degree. However, all the instances we've done it, we've seen it ramp up in 2 weeks. Very close to what Google does. But we don't see the evening out of, and that's from a performance standpoint, we don't see an evening out of the spend for about 4 or 5 weeks. That's the weird oddity. So the performance comes first, then the spend seems to even itself out over time for a longer period of time. I can't quite explain it, but that's what we keep running into.
Yeah, that's interesting. again, a good call out if people are looking to test. I guess if you can go into it, allowing for that 6 weeks, perfect. To your point, not always possible because various reasons. But if you can't do that, like these sort of call outs from testing it are really, really useful. Performance after 2 weeks and the rest it settles. Okay. This has been really useful. I think there's loads of really, really good advice on how to approach Bing. I think starting off like the demo thing is really important, just to bear that in mind. It's an important data point when thinking about how you position Bing within the media mix. The inventory question, no video, shopping not getting picked up, some of the demographic controls, the budgeting, like these are all really, really useful things. And things we're used to, like we know how to manage this stuff. It's just knowing these nuances as we go in. So thank you for going through all that. My last question, while we have you, is again, with someone with a lot of experience in the search industry, what are you most excited or interested, or what's kind of piqued your interest the most as we go into what feels like the next phase of search?
I mean, I'm hopeful for AI Max, or not AI Max. I'm sorry, AI overview responses and all that. When you look at the concept on paper, you're like, all right, this is going to immediately lead to a decrease in CTR, a decrease in post. But you know what? What I also think about at the same time, AI overviews answer your questions. They don't sell you products. They don't sell you services. They just answer your questions. So an integration of an ad unit into that may actually lead to a lower CTR, but it may lead to a higher efficiency and conversion rates. What I need both platforms ultimately to do is to really get out of their own way and say, look, this is the ad unit that's going to appear in the AI overview. I mean, we've seen the product ones that show up at the very bottom of it if you actually ever see it. I've seen the previews of them where they show up actually integrated into the answers, which is a little bit more intriguing to me. And I have high hopes for those scenarios because, yes, I may see a lower CTR, but I do believe I want to see a higher conversion rate, and that's where it's going to get better. I just need both platforms to figure out their billing scenario, because if they don't figure out their billing scenario, it'll never fully ramp out, because there's no way they're going to let this progress without them being able to monetize it in a strong way. And then they will have to then turn around and talk to me, the skeptic, about trying to explain to me how the responses in AI overview won't be influenced by the ads that are being served in it. But I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
Yeah. That's very interesting, and I agree with the forces at play, or the way that user journey is changing would suggest that it leads to a more qualified user at the point that they then do leave Google. Big question right now. I think I agree with you in that that feels like something that's going to lead to higher conversion rates. I think the thing for me then it is like, well, is that going to be higher CPCs? We're going to pay more for that inventory, and if we are, then hopefully that's an equal trade-off. But
I mean, my own conspiracy theory is I don't think we'll be paying for CPCs on ads and AI overview. I think ultimately it's going to probably be treated like they treat Performance Max, and that was a cost per interaction, cost per engagement, which is the most vague terminology. I mean, if you're seeing a reduced CTR, why would Google continue on in the methodology of a CPC if they're going to get less of it?
I guess in the belief they could raise the CPCs, but I'd love that as a hot take that Google Ads is potentially going to move from CPC to cost per goal.
I mean, if you go read the definition of cost per interaction, it literally ends with "and other things."
Yeah. So, well, I mean, compare the numbers in the interaction column to the clicks column, and you'll know straight away there's a big difference there. Awesome. This is great, John. Loads of great advice, and really great to think about the future of search with you as well. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.